All right, here we go. We are having another not AMA, another celebration, another streaming thing. I almost said AMA since we did one yesterday. Today we're celebrating having reached, but not actually completely passed, a milestone in video production. I've created 500 videos in the Core Concept series that I think many of you have watched at one time or another. Should probably actually come up with a badge for people who actually read all five or watch all 500 of them. Maybe two badges, one for people who watch all of them, the other for people who not only watch all of them but read all the texts. In any case, I thought what I would do is, before taking questions and comments, I already see some on the side that I'll get to in a bit, is talk a bit about how I got started with shooting this particular kind of video, since it's been a number of years, and where I'm planning on going with it. And I also want to mention too that I created something that I don't usually do. I created a poll that all of you who are participating in this can take if you want to. If you click on the little eye thing up in the should be top right corner, you'll not only see the usual Patreon thing and also a link to the Core Concepts playlist, but also the poll. I'm asking people, I'm going to keep shooting these videos. Where do you want the focus to be? Ancient, medieval, early modern, 19th century, or 20th, 21st century? So I'll see what people have to say about that. So I see a lot of stuff coming in here. A lot of people are saying congratulations. That's very nice of you. And, I'll say something as well. This is not something that I think I would have sustained were it not for devoted subscribers and supporters and fans. People generally like these videos. I do get some, nasty or other types of comments as well. But for the most part, it's been a very positive experience. And that's important. I think I was just answering a question on Quora today about YouTube stuff. And it was by somebody who I think was quite understandably worried about people attacking his or her stuff when they put that out there. And if you look at a lot of YouTube comments, they're often quite negative, right? So let me explain how I got started with this. So originally, when I was shooting YouTube videos, it was just me coming in. I wonder if I still have it here. I've got the tripod. I'm digging in my one of my many drawers. Well, you'll just have to imagine. I don't think I have any of the cameras still here. I used to use a flip camera, and I would just put it on this tripod, and come into class and plop it down and just start lecturing. And, hopefully the students wouldn't walk in front of it or bump it or anything like that. I wasn't using any recording device like I use now here. You can see my little lapel mic that, of course, you see on more recent videos. And then I record the things on here and take that sound file. It was just me setting this tripod up with my old flip cam and shooting. And I did that for entire class sessions. And we didn't do any real editing at all, just took the things and plunked them up there, added some descriptions, didn't worry about metadata, any of that sort of business, because they were primarily for my students as a resource. If they missed class, many of them were athletes and had to travel, or they were in the band or things like that. And, they would still go to class. And then people from all over the world started chiming in and saying, oh, this is really helpful for me. My instructor won't explain anything. I don't know how many comments I got like that. People saying my instructor talks down to me, won't answer questions. It's really quite sad in many ways. And so the stuff started catching on. And I was shooting these videos were like 50 minutes to up to an hour and a half. And contrary to all the experts who were saying at that time, videos for pedagogy can't be any longer than 10 minutes, because the experts don't actually know what the hell they're talking about much of the time. People would watch them all the way through. But then I started thinking, I'd look at the shorter videos, And I was thinking, can I use any of these as resources for my students? And I'm not going to name any names, but all of you, you've probably looked at a lot of things on YouTube, and you see these, 2 to 10 minute animations with lots of glitz and lots of production and music. And they're often kind of short on substance. And sometimes they're actually wrong, because the people are more interested in making videos and less in making particularly good videos. So I started thinking to myself, what can I do for my students that would be, not these marathon class sessions, but, more like the videos that I'm seeing coming out where it's one main idea, like say Plato's doctrine of the forms, in this particular piece, or Aristotle's distinction between 3 different kinds of friendship. So I started experimenting first with taking class sessions in which I'd already shot a long video. Now I was teaching ethics and intro for the 3rd, 4th time at Marist. And I already had video footage, and I was like, well, now I can shoot, but I'm going to turn these into these shorter videos. And that's what I did. So that was really quite helpful. And the students responded well to it, and people were like, yeah, I kind of like this stuff. So then I started doing it outside of class, and then we got this chalkboard, right, which many of you have seen at our old place in Kingston, New York, where I had like the bookshelf behind. And, this is, of course, my studio in Milwaukee, where we've lived since 2015. And, as I've been teaching classes, whether they're my own online classes for I did some work with a few educational startups, none of which ever went anywhere, with a Palermo and the Global Center for Advanced Studies. Unfortunately, neither of them panned out. And I also started creating my own classes in Teachable, the Study with Sadler Academy. But I also started teaching, for other places here in Milwaukee. And then I would say, well, it'd be nice to have some videos on, say, Descartes' Discourse on Method, because I'm going to teach that, and it'd be cool to have that as a resource for my students, and I bet other people would like it as well. So I started shooting those sorts of things, and that's what I've been doing continually. You notice that a good bit of the video production is, in fact, driven by whatever I happen to be teaching that semester. And I also shot some stuff that I thought, kind of needed to be out there, like the Pascal stuff. I got commissioned to shoot some of the videos. Like somebody, for example, said, hey, I want you to do Heidegger's discussion of Plato's, allegory of the cave. And so I said, okay, I'll do that for a price. And, we agreed to a price, and then I shot it and uploaded it, and it was not only to benefit that person, but others as well. And so now the core concept series, we've reached 500 of them, and I'm thinking about what it is that I want to do going forward. And I think, I still want to use them for my classes. So I'll, for example, I'm going to teach an existentialism class this summer. It's an online class. So I need some more core concept videos on existentialist thinkers, right? But I also want to start filling in gaps where I think, well, this is an important set of ideas, or this is an important thinker, and there's not a lot of really good quality content out there. It's like, very long videos on the one hand, or these short, glitzy, high production, low content videos on the other hand. There's not a lot of stuff in between. So I want to do some more of those. So for example, you're going to see within the next year, you're definitely going to see some stuff on well, you will see it actually, because I'm teaching it this semester, David Hume and the inquiry regarding human understanding. Because I need that for my students, but also because we need to fill in those gaps. I'm not teaching Locke this term, and I probably won't be teaching him next term either, but it would be kind of good to have some stuff on like primary and secondary qualities, or the theory of property that's in the second treatise, or some of those key ideas as well. All right, so that's probably enough of me talking at you about what we're doing. Again, thanks for showing up, everybody, for this celebration. I'm really kind of excited and happy about that, and it's not just because I'm getting over being sick and now starting to feel a bit better, so I have more energy, actually enough energy to shoot videos tonight. I haven't shot videos for over a week, but I'll share this time with you. Again, let me remind you, those of you who've popped in recently, we have a poll. If you click on the little I button, you'll see that poll. I'm going to take some suggestions, limited suggestions, of course, because it's a poll from all of you, as to what you'd most like to see coming next, whether it's ancient, medieval, early modern, or 19th century or 20th century philosophy. So let me start looking now at what we got here. Okay, so Peter says, I just discovered your channel today. I have to say your lectures on the Apollonian, Dionysian dialectic are brilliant. So that must be the Nietzsche Birth of Tragedy stuff. I've got 4 hours of those 4 lectures. And yeah, and the Apollonian Dionysian, that's just the beginning, right? There's a third important noble response to life that supplants both of them in Nietzsche's view, and that's the Socratic Alexandrian response as well. So I'm glad that you like that. Shaf Ali Khan, can you suggest some ways to develop kids' interest in philosophy? There's a number of ways. I mean, part of it is I think, modeling. This doesn't just go for philosophy. This goes for literature and literacy in general. One thing that psychologists have discovered by doing longer term studies is a good predictor for whether a child is going to read on their own outside of whatever they're required to do for school or later on for work, but for pleasure, is that they see adults and adults who they care about deliberately structuring their lives so as to read for pleasure. So, if you grow up in a house without any books, or the only books there are textbooks and whatever you happen to be bringing in, probably not going to be a reader, right? If you see mom and dad only reading things because they have to, not because they actually like to, probably not going to be a reader. So I would say that that's a really important baseline right there. Just the modeling, taking an interest in things. And, there's a lot of ways to take philosophical concepts of one form or another and make them relevant to children. One way is thinking about practical life and moral dilemmas that they run into about fairness, or what they ought to do when a friend is getting in trouble, or, how they understand their emotions. Philosophers, at least, interesting philosophers, have a lot to say about those topics. And kids are also interested in the nature of reality and how we know things. They're interested in metaphysics and epistemology. And you can also build off of what they're doing in school, hopefully without undermining the teachers that they have, because odds are the teachers are not super well versed in anything having to do with philosophy. So you don't want to have your kid come home from earth science class and then say, well, your teacher completely, misrepresented the scientific method. Here's, some Karl Popper or something like that. You want to build off of what they're getting. I think there's many opportunities for having kids encounter philosophy. And I think it's important, too, that when you're bringing in an idea, say, from Aristotle, you let them know that it's actually there in Aristotle. It's not like they're going to pick up the Nicomachean Ethics at age 10 and start reading their way through it. But, if they hear it enough, right, maybe then later on they'll start finding their way to it. Or when they take a college class or something and encounter it, then you've got something to work with. They're not just encountering it for the first time. So it's a great question. I see some hellos and some congratulations here. Der Zweig, congratulations on the big 500. Keep up the good work. I will certainly try to do that. Made of Clay, 500-hour AMA. Well, it's not 500 hours, 500 videos. These aren't the hour-long videos. I don't know how many hours of video I actually have. I don't know if it's 1,000 yet, because a lot of what I've shot are these core concept videos, right? So there aren't quite so many of those. Those are, they're not quite as long. They're anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes. All right, so more Marcos, 500 Club, congratulations. Hope I have another 500. I would like, and this is rather ambitious, and we should probably think about how this could actually happen. I would like to, maybe make 5,000. I mean, I'm definitely going to make another 500 because there's so many gaps to get to. I mean, you can just take any text, any great text in philosophy, and if it's, you know, there's going to be quite a few core concept videos we could get out of it. When now that I have actually got a better idea about how I'm doing it as well, I think I was kind of, you know, less certain about how to divide things up when I first started. But you know, so if I did 5,000, right? So if I did 250 a year, and that's pretty ambitious. Let's say I do 200 a year. How long would that take me? Well, 10 years would be 2,000, and 20 years would be, you know, 4,000, and then another, you know, 2-3 years after that. So, you know, 22 and a half years. Now, you know, everything would be white by then if I still have hair, but you know, who knows what YouTube will look like by then too, right? We may be in a totally different format, but you know, it sure couldn't hurt to keep cranking them out. So that's what I plan on doing. All right, here's some other questions that are not about that, but about other things. Zweig asks if I can publish the translation of Patri et Humanite. Kind of hard to find anything about it. That's a little-known Maurice Blondel work. Maurice Blondel is a little-known, but you know, undeservedly so, French Catholic philosopher from the late 19th century, early 20th century, on whom I wrote my dissertation. Somebody who's really, you know, at the heart, along with Bergson and a few others, in producing the revitalization of metaphysics in French thought in the 20th century, paved the way for phenomenology, as Christian Dupont has shown in his dissertation. So, yeah, I mean, what I've got, when I translated it into English, and the file is somewhere in my stuff in a WordPerfect version. So I would have to convert it to Word, and then take a look at what I actually translated. It might not be that good. I don't know. I haven't looked at it for years and years and years, the translation. So before I publish it, I definitely want to like read it through again and probably improve the grammar. At that time, I had the view that a translation should really sound like a translation. It should be as close to the original text as possible. I don't actually subscribe to that quite so rigorously and rigidly anymore. So I think I would probably want to change it a bit. R.T. Whitby, can you explain the rivalry between Diogenes the Cynic and Plato? Did they really hate each other? So this is stuff that's coming from, you know, hearsay much later on from Diogenes Laertes. Did they hate each other? I don't know that they hated each other. They certainly espoused different ways of living. You know, Diogenes, there's some, you know, disagreement about whether Diogenes really studied with Antisthenes or not. You know, should Diogenes be considered the first cynic? I don't really buy it. I think the Antisthenes, who studied with Socrates, lineage really is, you know, how we got the Cynic school. But Diogenes was definitely attracted to it by temperament, as I think many people are to philosophical schools, you know, certainly at certain stages in their life. Diogenes and Plato stood for two very different ways of doing philosophy, and they both liked razzing each other. So, you know, I think that's all we need to explain that rivalry. Memento Mori says, congratulations. I hope your health is well and you're happy. I hope everything's all right. Yeah, my health could be better. You know, I've gotten nailed by a few illnesses, sort of seasonal things, you know, colds and flus, maybe a bit more this time around. And you know, it keeps me, of course, from going to the gym and working out. But, you know, hopefully this week I get to go back to the gym. And, you know, I'm in the process of losing weight and eating healthier and all that sort of stuff. And if I exercise the way I should, maybe I can live for quite a long time. Apparently, you know, genetically, looks like my biological parents are, you know, giving me some decent stuff to work with. So, yeah, the key is to reduce stress, I think. All right, more congratulations from different people. I'm not going to go into the Jordan Peterson thing that I keep getting asked about every single time. So, maybe someday I'll find the time to do a video about that. All right, Smack Lover 69 saw your Heidegger stuff recently. Really great, thanks. Oh, good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I do want to shoot some more Heidegger core concept stuff, and maybe some other stuff as well in that existentialism series if I ever get that rolling again. Those longer hour-long videos on existentialism. Heidegger's an important philosopher. He made some contributions. He's become even more controversial lately with the publication of the Black Notebooks. Now we know that there really is no he was only kind of a Nazi thing to say about him. He really was a Nazi. But you can strip away some of the ideas from that, and he's a brilliant interpreter of many thinkers. So it's kind of unfortunate. All right, Marka, will there be more Nietzsche? Yes, there will definitely be more Nietzsche, and hopefully I'll get to it later this spring because I am teaching a little, not the whole thing, but some parts of Beyond Good and Evil to my students in the Marquette Foundations of Philosophy class, and we're doing a really short bit of Nietzsche for the MATC Intro to Philosophy class here as well. So, probably some stuff from that. Down the line, you're definitely going to see some stuff from the genealogy, from Birth of Tragedy, probably do some stuff from Thus Spoke Zarathustra, because people are out. There's certain key passages that people are always, going back to. What does this mean? What does this mean? So yeah, we'll do more Nietzsche. Rohan, what normative ethical system do you adhere to? Well, I'm a virtue ethicist. I think a lot of people know that. I'm rather eclectic. I draw upon, as with Cicero, for example, somebody who I hold in high esteem. I draw upon, the Stoics pretty heavily, the Aristotelian tradition pretty heavily, a good bit of stuff from the Platonists, particularly the Middle Platonists, some Christian thinkers. I think it's important to engage with the insights that the existentialists had. And, Alistair McIntyre is somebody who's still alive, hopefully for quite a while longer, who I really look up to and take as sort of a, example of what a good virtue ethicist looks like, not only in personal life, but also in how he approaches other traditions. All right. 555327 asks a question. A lot of people, I think, probably don't know that I am a big metalhead, and not only listen to heavy metal, and not only sort of was raised on that and still go to concerts, but also have a blog which I haven't contributed to for a long time called Heavy Metal Philosopher. So, and I do have the intention of doing writing in there eventually. And he has favorite, or she, I don't know what gender they are, favorite Sabbath album. That's a tough one. I'll say this. So some of this has to do with a bit more biography. If I could only pick one thing from classic Sabbath, I would probably take that compilation album, We Sold Our Soul for Rock and Roll, because that's got some of the really great stuff throughout the Ozzy time, the original lineup career in it, doesn't it? There's a lot of really great albums in that set, but that's kind of a good one. I also, when I was in high school, I got my hands on Born Again, and a lot of people don't like that album. It's the production on it could have been better. The album cover is terrible, but Sabbath with Ian Gillan, pretty awesome. And Tony Iommi and Geezer Butler were really on top of things as far as riffs. One of the heaviest metal riffs ever. Probably something that if I ever get to come on stage to some music, I would probably want to do is from Zero the Hero. I really love that song. Then again, one of the other super heavy riffs is from the one song, well, not one song, one of the songs with Ronnie James Dio singing "The Devil Cried." Pretty amazing stuff. But so I would, if I could only pick one single album, probably would actually pick one of the Dio albums, because I kind of like Dio better with Sabbath, and I like the revitalization that he brought to it than I like Ozzy. So I guess the Mob Rules. All right. R.T. Whitby, what are some of the biggest misconceptions about ancient philosophy? That's a good question. I would say probably the biggest misconception is that, and a lot of people have this because they come to it, anticipating it to be like contemporary philosophy, that it was disconnected from life. It was this sort of abstract thing that people were doing, and it was just for these very small elites. And that's not really the case. It's not as if everybody was studying philosophy, but ancient philosophy was meant to be something that you would live out and sort of think your way through. So I think that's quite important. Der Zweig says 10 minutes is the max for super boring content, I guess. That's going back to that thing with the pedagogical experts. Even today still, I'm developing this online class, and some of the people that I'm working with, they're like, don't make your videos any longer than 10 minutes. And I'm like, you just don't get it. That was maybe decent advice a long time ago, but it wasn't even decent advice then, because it is based on the sort of average level of college lecture, which is, not very good. But if you're engaging your audience, if you have, like good, stories and examples, and you're energetic, and, you're not just presenting yourself in a boring kind of way, I think you could, I mean, I have no problem without notes sometimes giving talks that last over an hour, and people are not leaving the room, and they're engaged, and sometimes they want to come up afterwards and talk more about it. So a lot of it has to do with being able to reach an audience. I'll say something here too, that's another thing about ancient philosophy. We often get this impression that, well, it comes from Plato, that, well, there's philosophy and then there's rhetoric, and you don't want to be involved with the rhetorics, and the sophists and stuff like that. And Aristotle, his own student, is like, yeah, that's a mistake. You need rhetoric. That's why, I'm giving you this book, The Art of Rhetoric. And then Cicero, much later on, he busts the chops of the Epicureans and the Stoics, saying, you guys have interesting material, but you're not attentive to your audience. You should actually learn how to arrange your stuff so you can reach a fuller audience. It's important to actually be attentive to the people that you're talking to, right? And it's kind of common sense, isn't it? You want people to listen to what you have to say. You think that, the stuff that you're talking about is important. Make it something that people can bear listening to. So, all right. Let's see here. 55327. How much Kant should you read and understand before trying to read Hegel? Some. It'd be a good idea to probably read your way through the Prolegomena and the groundwork, and maybe some of the other stuff. But it depends on what Hegel you're reading too. By the way, I don't even suggest starting with the phenomenology. I did the half-hour Hegel thing on the phenomenology precisely because that's where most people start. But I think it's actually better to start with the lectures on the history of philosophy and the lectures on the philosophy of history. Those are more accessible works. So, all right. Marka asks, more core concepts of Nietzsche. Yep, going to do some of those. Any possibility to have Marx? Yes. Wittgenstein? Yes. Foucault? Yes. Derrida? Yes. I don't know when I'll be doing those. I do need to get some Wittgenstein stuff done for my MATC Intro to Philosophy class, but we'll see it's probably just going to be some stuff out of philosophical investigations, and I don't know how much I'll actually be able to do. Marx, I got to decide what I'd actually work on. Foucault and Derrida, again, the challenge is to figure out what I would want to start with. Those guys are complicated, right? R.T. Whitby, which ancient philosophers do you think are the most underappreciated? That's a good question. I'll say Plutarch. A lot of people know Plutarch because of his biographies, right? The parallel lives. But Plutarch himself, he wrote all these different works, and they're called the Moralia. It's not one work. It's sort of like the Bible, right? Bible, Biblia means books, a whole bunch of different books, different kinds of points of view and interests. So Cicero has all this stuff crammed together into the Moralia, and there's some really cool stuff in there. I actually like him quite a bit. What other ancient philosophers are underappreciated? I mean, you can't say the Stoics because they're getting a lot of attention now. I mean, Cicero still. I think a lot of people are like, Cicero is just a derivative. He's taking ideas from other people and putting them together and giving his own little take on it, but his take isn't very interesting. I think that shows somebody who hasn't actually read the texts attentively. They came to it just with that sort of thing in mind. I really like Cicero. I think he's still kind of undervalued stock, so to speak. He's worth reading for his own, sake. He's worth reading because he made this major contribution to the history of philosophy. And he's worth reading in order to be able to figure out what the Epicureans and Stoics actually did talk, because he's closer to them in time than some of the other sources that we have, and he tells us what their doctrines were, and I think that he's pretty accurate in that. And then, I mean, the Neoplatonists could certainly use more study. Alexander of Aphrodisias, great person to read as well if you're interested in the Aristotelian tradition. So you're usually just scholars who check him out, but I think he's kind of readable at least, so he's worth checking out. Yeah, those are some of them. I'd also say too, because they're still in the ancient period, some of the early Christian philosophers, they get written off. Oh, they're church fathers, they're theologians. Lactantius is a philosopher. He's got this amazing book on the divine anger, where he really contributes to the discussions about what anger is. He knows the other philosophical schools, and then contributes his own interesting view, not only about divine, but about human anger. Justin Martyr is worth reading. Clement of Alexandria, I'm a big fan of him. So there's quite a few, but John Cassian too, right? There's quite a few people that are worth checking out within that time. All right, so just skipped up a little bit. 1916 had a thing. Here we go. I've read Stirner. You're all my property now. Okay, and then Rohan is busting his chops as well. All right, encyclical. Greg, could you maybe do a core concept video on speculative realism? Garcia, Harman, Massilio. Well, I mean, here's the thing. I don't do core concepts on a sort of given broad movement, because that's not a core concept. I would have to do like a series on any one of them, and maybe I will, but I mean, they're not high on my priority list. That's the sort of thing I would do if commissioned, but there's so many things within the history of philosophy that I really need to get to. All right, let's see here. Made of clay, what's my thoughts on Matthew 10:39? Whoever finds their life will lose it. Whoever loses their life for my sake will find it, considering that people usually find their life in Christ first. I wouldn't make too much depend in a sort of proof texting way, and then drawing, like conclusions from it in that sort of way from any particular verse. They're always having to be read in a larger context. Cynthia says, I second the request for Wittgenstein. I'm struggling with the Tractatus big time. Yeah, I mean, and the Tractatus could probably be dealt with in not too many videos, because, it's pretty, once you see what's going on there's not that much different things going on. So, R.J. Whitby, why is skepticism less popular than the philosophies of Platonism, Aristotelian, and Stoicism? I don't know that it is. I see a lot of people calling themselves Pyrrhonian skeptics or academic skeptics today. There's a whole skeptic movement, and they do often, reference the ancient thinkers, I would say that there's probably, the Stoicism is probably the biggest ancient philosophy that's being given a sort of modern update, and I would say that Epicureanism and Skepticism are probably in second and third, and then Platonism and Aristotelianism would be coming behind. There's probably more interest in Aristotelianism among religious people than there is among secular people using it as a way of orienting their lives. Goldman liked my discussion of Seneca's on anger. I'm glad to read that. Cynthia says, congratulations. Thanks for making philosophy relevant and understandable. Finish the short courses on the Apology, Meno, et alia. Absolutely brilliant. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed those. I'm going to be building online courses that include like handouts and stuff like that in the Study with Sadler Reason.io Academy that I have over in Teachable. Bill Ausen, would you recommend some epistemologists? Sure. Descartes, Pascal, Hume, Locke. I mean, these are all people doing major work in epistemology. If you're asking about like contemporary epistemologists, I don't have any idea. It's not something I work in. All right. Intellectual dark web, 500 hours of core concept videos makes it sound like there isn't really a core at all. Well, again, it's not 500 hours of core concept videos. I don't know where people got that idea. If you're actually watching them, you know, of course, that they're anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes. So each one is a core concept. It's not saying that there's some sort of vast core that they're all part of. All right. And Cyclical says 5 million videos. That would take a team. Then I would have to do what they call in business scaling up. And that'd be a tough thing to do, right? Because I'd have to trust whoever's making the videos to do them along, I don't want to say, in my way, but along the lines that I could get behind. And that'd be tough to do, right? Okay, let's see here. Elvis Presley's, do you think compatibilism is bullshit? No, I'm a compatibilist. I mean, it'd be weird if I thought it was, right? So, compatibilism is somebody who thinks that there is a causal nexus and there is determinism, and yet there is freedom. And then the trick is to explain how that comes about. And the people who I like the best are compatibilists as well. Marcos Corona, is Donald Trump the reason why Socrates didn't like the idea of democracy? So obviously you can't mean, that Socrates somehow presciently saw ahead to this time and saw Trump. But you're asking, like, are figures like Donald Trump and what he does and represents, why Socrates didn't like the idea of democracy? In part, but you can't have a Trump without having people who vote for Trump, and you can't have a Trump without corrupt political parties. Not excusing the guy; he's a total dumpster fire as far as I'm concerned. But both as a politician and as a human being. But you can't have somebody like that actually making it through, threading all these needles without some major rot within the political body. And that's what we've had. Socrates is worried about demagoguery, and he's worried about that, that sort of thing. But, it's not like he thought that oligarchy was going to be any better. So you can say the same thing about Aristotle, too. All right, Jonathan says, have you determined what text you will work through after you finish the half-hour Hegel series? If so, is it a secret? I have not determined what I'm going to do, what big book I'm going to do. I have said I'm going to apply the half-hour Hegel sort of methodology to other texts. And I've done that with like Epictetus's Enchiridion. 21 videos, going through the entire text, same sort of thing, reading it aloud, commenting on each chapter, each verse. I want to do Descartes' Meditations. I have a nice copy over on my shelf that has the Latin and the French, and so I'll probably put that, Latin, French, and English there, and then comment on it, bit by bit. I'll probably do Anselm's Proslogion as well. So I've got those sort of things. But what big book, right? I mean, I thought about doing Heidegger's Being in Time or Sartre's Being in Nothingness, People want me to do Hegel's Science of Logic, but man, that would, I'm not a Hegelian to begin with. So, taking on the task of doing the phenomenology is already kind of a labor of love. Yeah, I think doing the science of logic would probably kill me. Right? I don't know. There's other texts that I might be willing to do. I've thought about doing like Aristotle's Metaphysics, or some people want me to do Thomas Aquinas' Summa Theologiae, but then I'd probably die before I actually finish it. There's so much material there. I don't actually know anybody who's read the entire Summa. Anybody who says that they have, I usually assume they're lying, or that they skimmed sections of it. Right? So I don't know. We'll see. Out of step, Nate, who are some thinkers you've yet to do any core concept videos on, but plan to? Wink, wink, Hobbes. Yeah, Thomas Hobbes is definitely somebody I need to shoot some videos on, and I've promised to do that in the past and haven't gotten to it. So I should get to him. He's important. Yeah. All right, Nam Sky, will there be any content about Herbert Marcuse? Perhaps something about one-dimensional man? That's not a bad idea. I like that book. Marcuse is not that hard to present on, in my experience. So, the easier it is to present on it, the more I'm usually willing to take on work, having learned the hard way about that sort of thing. Yeah, Marcuse, he'd be somebody fun to do. I'll mention this too, by the way. One of the reasons why I did the existentialism series and why I started Half Hour Hegel is I would get all these people, like in the first 2 years of my shooting the videos, saying, can you do videos on this? Can you do videos on this? So eventually I created a poll for all of my YouTube subscribers. And I was like, okay, pick anybody you like. Who would you like me to do videos on? Pick like your top 3 of people. And the top 4, way more than anybody else, were Heidegger, Sartre, Hegel, and Marcuse. There was a lot of interest in him back then. I was really surprised, because he's somebody who I've read, and I know a few people who like him, but I haven't read too many. I haven't seen too many other people who actually reference him. And so, yeah, he could be a good person to do. One-dimensional man, I think, would be the place to start, and then maybe Eros and Eros and Civilization. There's other stuff, and I've already got them. All right, Bill Austin, nothing like philosophy and metal. And then there's Zweig. Well, there's also dark wave. I don't know. Dark wave, I think, must be like some new wave thing. Maybe I listened to some of that. Anton Nielsen, Enter the Void, pretty much started. Doom metal, Masters of Reality. Well, I mean, Witchfinder General, I would say, along with Black Sabbath, started doom metal. It's unfortunate Witchfinder General didn't stay together much longer because their stuff is amazing. All right, Gabriel, we have more metal stuff. Power metal and philosophy sounds like a wild night in the humanities department. Yeah, but I mean, most of my colleagues don't like metal. I sometimes play it when I'm sitting in my office, and then I get weird looks. I have an office over at Marquette that I share with 2 other adjuncts. All right. Let's see here. 555327 asks, how do you feel about Horkheimer and Adorno's dialectic of enlightenment and or the culture industry? Yeah, if I was going to try to do core concept videos on Adorno, it would probably make more sense to do it, in his collaborations with Horkheimer, because they're a hell of a lot easier to summarize. Right? Adorno is very tough. Adorno is Hegel level difficulty. Vana Strata, what system of ethics are you most fond of? Well, I brought this up before. Virtue ethics, 555327, it can be difficult to reconcile liking popular music, especially jazz. Yeah, Adorno hated jazz with Adorno's ideas. Well, there's nothing that says you have to accept all of his ideas, right? He could have been wrong on quite a few things. Encyclical, what tradition do I draw my ontology from? Should one's ontology be as flat as possible? So again, Same thing as with ethics. I draw from multiple traditions. I'm an eclectic. And should your ontology be as flat as possible, your ontology should be as rich as possible so that you can actually take into account this incredibly complex world that we live in. I'm not in favor of making philosophy nice and simple so that problems are easier to solve, because they're not usually then solved. Philosophy is a way for us to, it's one discipline among many that helps us sort of figure out where the hell we are and what to do. For me, philosophy is ultimately practically driven, even if it is speculative or theoretical. I'm with Hegel on that, quite frankly. So, Bill says, congratulations on 500 videos. What books do you recommend to develop a proper understanding of Christian history and theology? Well, I mean, there's a lot of Christian thinkers that I think you want to read that were really, important. And you can read summaries of them, but it's good to actually read them too. And I'm a big fan of some of the early church fathers. I mentioned some of them earlier in this. Like if you want to understand monasticism, for example, you really need to read Western monasticism, Benedict's Rule, right? And then one of the books that he mentions to the monks that they ought to be reading, John Cassian's Conferences, and you should read the Institutes as well. And, again, for Western Christianity, Augustine is absolutely central. For the East, there's all these great church fathers and doctors, but then you also want to read the Philokalia. A lot of interesting thinkers crammed in there as well. And there's a lot of good summaries out there. I'm also a fan of the people who do sort of like the cultural studies. I was just moving books around in my shelf. I was thinking about I was looking at Wayne Meek's The Origins of Christian Morality and thinking, okay, can I put this over by the Stoics because he brings up the Stoics, or should I actually put this back on the shelf, back with the early Christianity stuff? So yeah, I think that's kind of good. And then you want to read other authors along the way as things are developing. If you want to understand like how the Protestant Reformation came about, for example, you should read Luther and his stuff back and forth with Erasmus, and some of his treatises are good to read. And you want to understand like where other traditions came from denominationally. You got to actually like check out some of the people. So like you want to understand where the Methodists and Wesleyans and holiness people are coming from, read John Wesley. I think it's always good to check out the primary sources. All right, let's see here. Noah the Cezad, I guess. Should I keep reading Carnap? Why not? I guess Carnap is getting kind of a revival these days. Who would ever thought, right? A logical positivist would. Kind of interesting. Thoughts on Deleuze? And then Tuvan asks, how much have you interacted with Deleuze? I like, some of Deleuze's stuff. I myself like the stuff that he did with Guattari less than I like when he's doing his own thing. My favorite stuff by him is The Logic of Sense and Essays Critical and Clinical. I think that's the right English translation of it. But, you also got to he also does some interesting history of philosophy, and that's really what The Logic of Sense is too, by the way. But you're always getting more Deleuze than you are the actual person that he's writing about. And so, yeah. All right. Noah also asked, well, I cover Leibniz. What about the analytics such as Carnap, Quine, Russell, and Neurath? Well, I did an analytic just recently, James Rachel's. But yeah, I'll I'm not I guess I could do Quine. I always find him really boring, quite frankly. Air, is a bit more fun. I had wanted to shoot some stuff on Air earlier this semester, but didn't get to it because, I was talking about emotivism. I mean, if I'm doing that, I should do Charles Stevenson too. Russell, yeah, I'll probably do some Russell down the line and Carnap. Leibniz, yeah, that's a definite, hole in the canon of core concept videos. And I would probably start with the discourse on metaphysics with Leibniz. Um, Maybe put it together with the monadology, which is sort of a best hits list or slogans list, and then start looking at some of his other essays. I don't know if I'd take on the Theodicy. That's a big book. All right, let's see what else we got here. We got to scroll up a bit. It just skipped again. Oh, Der Zweig, do you know a good work to get an overview for the Chinese philosophers, like, for example, a history or something like that? I think the stuff that I read is probably kind of out of date. There's probably better stuff, that's come out more recently. But I do like that book by Graham, Disputers of the Tao. I think it's pretty good. Some people say that it's not, but I think it's pretty good. And there's this book, and I've got it on my shelf, and I think it's called The Source Book in Chinese Philosophy. It's about like this thick, and it's an anthology, and it's nice. It's got a lot of stuff, all the way up to like the 20th century. But again, I'm not. See, this is one of the things when it comes to Chinese, Indian, even Islamic stuff. I don't have the level of expertise that I have in Western philosophy. All right. Let's see here. Encyclical. Any up and coming philosophers we should take a look at? I'm sure there's a ton of them, but I don't know any of them. So, I mean, it's kind of funny. I'm kind of Lovecraftian in that way. I'm an antiquarian, right? As he used to call it, right? And so I don't know enough about my own present. I mean, I don't have any friends or colleagues that I would, unequivocally say, oh my gosh, you have to read this person. There's a lot of great thinkers out there. We're living in kind of an extraordinary time. I mean, I will say I'm really looking forward to seeing Chris Gill's book coming out on Stoicism and virtue ethics. And if you haven't read his, recent book on the self and Hellenistic philosophy, you probably want to check him out. That's Chris Gill at Exeter University. Nice guy. Kind of, fun to meet him because I hold his, work up in high esteem. I've been fortunate. I've gotten to meet quite a few of my heroes over the course of time. Julia Annas, Kate Rogers, Alistair McIntyre. That's pretty fun. Paul Griffiths, when I get to do that, and most of them turn out to be really cool people, which is nice. All right, Magnus Official. My heart broke when I heard about your Black Dog Magnus as a heavy metal philosopher. Have you heard Cradle of Filth's album Midian? It begins with songs at the gates of Midian, Cthulhu, Dawn. I think I heard some Cradle of Filth years ago and didn't like what I heard. I'm not into like newer stuff for the most part. But yeah, Magnus he was a great dog. He was my little buddy. So now Macaroons asked me about something I'm not competent to talk about either. What painters do you feel had the strongest philosophical impact? I don't know. That's a great question, but I don't know. Chip asks, do you teach on the pre-Socratics? Do you plan on doing any core concepts on them? I do teach the pre-Socratics when I have to. We're handicapped by the fact that we don't really have much original stuff, right? We have these summaries, and I talked about that in my Aristotle core concept videos on Metaphysics Book 1 because Aristotle's talking about them. But, I think we need to make a distinction between actually having like texts or fragments of texts and then having some philosophers take, Plato tells us what the pre-Socratics thought as well, but it's within the context of Plato's project. So, I could see doing something on Parmenides and his poem, and I could see doing something on Heraclitus. But, it's which fragments do we take then? It's kind of tough, right? To figure out what we're going to do. Gabriel asks, what are your feelings on Berkeley? That's the guy, in he was a bishop in the Anglican Church. He's sort of midway between Locke and Hume in the empiricist lineage. I like Berkeley. I enjoy reading him. I actually tried to do some writing on him a long time ago. It's probably in a format that can't be read by my computer anymore, because I wanted to publish some stuff on Berkeley some time ago, but never got to it. He's somebody who I've taught, and I enjoy him. So, I could see doing some core concepts on him. Ken asked, did the existentialists, so Heidegger, Sartre, Simone de Beauvoir, Camus, have any opinions, criticisms on the competing analytic school of their time, say from the Vienna Circle, Wittgenstein, Russell? So they didn't know anything about Wittgenstein. And I doubt many of them even paid any attention to Russell. The Vienna Circle would have been more on Heidegger's, view, because they were saying his stuff was nonsense. They thought of what the analytics were doing in general as just being a variety of positivism, not even logical positivism, just kind of here's what we reduce philosophy to. Analytic philosophy and existentialism, you could say, in broad speaking, are reacting against a certain kind of Hegelianism, but sometimes incorporating things from it. There are some interesting people on the analytic side, and then on the later, if you want to consider Ricoeur an existentialist, I don't actually myself, but he certainly took analytic philosophy seriously. And John Wisdom, on the analytic side, certainly took existentialism seriously. So there's some bridges. All right. Tuvan asks, how familiar are you with Negarestani? Not at all. I don't know. Antarctican, could you do Husserl videos, or is he outside of what you prefer to cover? Well, I could do Husserl videos. I find Husserl incredibly boring to read. I'll just admit that right off the bat. And I actually did my master's thesis on Husserl. I did it on the passive synthesis lectures. But I guess if I was going to do something on Husserl, it'd probably be on Cartesian meditations, because that's kind of interesting stuff. But man, I find his phenomenological descriptions kind of dull. Now, another phenomenologist I'd really like to do some stuff on is Max Scheler. And I'd also do stuff on Merleau-Ponty. He'd be fun to do stuff on. But I like reading them. So I even find, quite often, this will show a little prejudice on my part, I find Husserl scholars are usually quite boring people, if they're straight out Husserl scholars. But that's just my thing, maybe it's a personality type of thing. Anton Nielsen, I'm currently an undergraduate philosophy student considering pursuing medicine therapy as a profession after. How does having a philosophy background benefit a practicing clinician? Well, that really depends, does it not, on what you're studying. If you're doing just analytic philosophy, reading 5 articles about this little thing here, using modal realism, or talking about internalism in action theory or something like that, probably not much. If you're reading Descartes and Princess Elizabeth and their correspondence about the connection between the mind and the body, and you're thinking about that, probably quite a bit, but not necessarily directly. It really depends on what you're studying, and what you do with it. So, and that's probably a function or factor of where you're going to school. One of the problems with philosophy is it's not like we have a standard curriculum. It's literally all over the map. Like at Marquette, where I'm teaching this foundations class, we don't even have a common reading for that class. We just have a mandate. Got to have some Plato or Aristotle. Got to have some Catholic thinker. Got to have some non-Western or thinker, and you got to have some contemporary thinker. And they don't tell you what contemporary means. So I used Hannah Arendt for mine. So yeah. All right, Tuvan, thoughts on geotrauma? Don't know what that is, so I don't have any thoughts on it. Chip, does playing metal in your office result in more students showing up to your office hours? Very few students ever show up to office hours, mostly just around midterms and final. It's not like students are wandering the halls and then suddenly hear metal and they're like, where's that sound coming from? I better go check it out. And many of them, I suppose, would kind of, they might be turned off from that. They could be like, that doesn't sound very, welcoming. So, you know, of course, maybe they'd show up and they'd be like, I'm ready to party. I heard your song, and the singer was saying, "Are you ready to party?" I'm ready to, I'm blanking on the Kiss song. Damn it. Oh, anyway, had a good joke there, but now I lost it. All right. Out of step, Nate. What level of Patreon support will it take you to get to live out of a wine jar? Well, I would have to do it part-time because I have a wife and, kids and a pet, well, two pets, and my books and stuff like that. So it would have to be like something that I would do like part-time, I think, but it would have to be a hell of a lot because that doesn't seem very comfortable at all. And here in Milwaukee, man, it gets cold. And then in the summer, it gets really hot. So I don't know about that. Carlos, is sociology integral with philosophy more than psychology? It depends. I mean, psychology, sociology, all the social sciences, same sort of deals with philosophy. They're all over the map. I mean, some places sociology is essentially, learning the stats, modelings, doing a few studies, and then just like crunching the numbers and then coming to some conclusions. In other places, you're actually going to study Marx, Weber, Durkheim. Other places, they're like, Marx who? Who Weber? So it's really tough to say. It really depends on the place. So Kanaglevi, what are the chances we'll see a half-hour Summa Theologia when you're done with Hegel? Man, that would be a huge undertaking. That would be tough to pull off. I'll do more core concept videos on Thomas, but I can't promise a half-hour Summa because that would take a long time. Kieran, what are your thoughts on Sam Harris? Not impressed. I don't pay much attention to him. Adam, you have to name the king of philosophy. You have to pick only one. Time and epochs don't matter. Well, what would a king be doing? I don't know. If I had to pick a king, one person to make king, well, maybe I'd pick Cicero, right? He was a good judge of the philosophers of his time. He was pretty fair to them. Sometimes a little tougher on the Epicureans, maybe than he should have been, but so maybe I'd do him. Jacqueline Chan, have you ever met Iris Murdoch? No, she would have been somebody I would have probably greatly enjoyed meeting, but no, I never met her. She is somebody whose novels I very much enjoy, and I like reading her other stuff as well. She's a great philosopher. Saku Arzuman, what do I think of Putnam's response to skepticism? Most people are disappointed by it in my experience. I haven't read Putnam for years. He was big stuff when I was in grad school. Even he came and talked, but I didn't spend enough time on him to really understand. Lucas asked, what are my thoughts on Ciron? Haven't read him, so I've read about him, but I don't have enough to say about him. Retro Gamer, I keep hearing modern popular literary analytic philosophers refer to Benjamin figuratively. Do you know Benjamin? Is the philosopher worth any exposition or not? Yeah, he's mostly known for that essay, The Art and the Age of Mechanical Reproduction. Walter Benjamin. He left a lot of stuff behind. I've never found him that profound or great the way that people who really get into him do seem to think, but maybe I'm missing something. Couldn't hurt to read them, make your own decision about it, but I've never found him measuring up to the hype. Kyle asks, Is there an identifiable clutch moment whereby intellectual conviction is crossed over into some kind of faith proper, or is the struggle and doubt intrinsic to the process? Faith as in belief in God. Where intellectual conviction is crossed over into some kind of faith. I mean, even people who have faith have doubt sometimes. Augustine is a great example of that. And, Maurice Blondel had this really nice metaphor. He was involved in these Christian philosophy debates. There's a lot of, well, where's, philosophy and theology begin, or something, philosophy and religion. And he said, man, people want to have it be a border, like with guards on one side or the other. It's more like that gases that penetrate each other in their interstices. There probably is. I mean, you can definitely say, well, this person's on this side, this person's on this side. But, conversion is not usually a matter of like one single thing making a decision for you, or determining you. So I don't know if there's an identifiable threshold like that. Jared, what language that's not English would you recommend learning for abundance of material from philosophers who wrote in that language? Well, great question. So, ancient Greek, Latin. Latin opens up not only the Roman philosophers for you, but the Middle Ages. And if you want to read Descartes' Meditations in the original, which he wrote in Latin, or his Principles of Philosophy. French, of course. German is good to have. For other, there's quite a lot of stuff out there in Spanish and Italian. And then we could talk about other languages. I mean, I wish I knew Arabic, but I don't. So that cuts me off from all of these, interesting Islamic and even some other philosophers who wrote in Arabic. Chinese, Sanskrit, Pali, all of these sort of classical languages in which there's massive bodies of literature would be good to have. So, all right. 55327. Do I know anything about the philosophy department at Ottawa? No, I don't. Oh, yeah, here we go. Rock and roll all night and party every day. Yeah, I was blanking on that for some reason. I wanted to say party every day. And then I couldn't remember what came after it. Well, because there's nothing that comes after it. It's before it. All right. Macaroons. What are your thoughts on Aleister Crowley? And do you consider thinkers that could be considered occultists to be of any value or relevance to philosophy? I mean, they're usually kind of marginal, in part because they want to make reference so much to the occult, but it could be interesting to take a look at. I had a student who was constantly trying to get me to read Crowley when I was teaching in the prison, and I just never actually found the time. But so I can't really say. I will say that he did give us an awesome Ozzy song. So, Chip, do you plan to do any Duns Scotus videos? I mean, maybe, but he's not like high on the priority list. Anton, as an FU to my follow-up, not an FU in the other sense, to my last question, my school is known for bioethics, so I guess that would help. Yeah, that's good. Do you think philosophy majors still demonstrate skills that get lost or limited in other areas of study? Yes. One of the things that philosophers turn out to wind up being quite good at is making distinctions. And that's not something easy to teach, right? And not all philosophy programs necessarily foster that, but it is something quite good. And why is that not the case, or why is it not the case for others? It's not. I guess they're usually so fixated on like, let's get through this material, that they're not as critical in their approach to it. All right, Western Man, I'm thinking of entering a philosophical undergraduate course next year. I'm also very right-wing, being influenced by Evola, Guénon, Spengler, and Heidegger. How do I navigate leftist Marxist professors? Well, I mean, first of all, don't assume that your professors are Marxist. Don't identify leftist with Marxist, because they're not the same thing. I would keep your stuff to yourself, because even among a lot of people, I mean, none of these are. Heidegger is a first-rate philosopher. None of these other people are. And if you like them basically because they fit the mood that you're in, yeah, I mean, substitute Nietzsche for Spengler to begin with, right? Substitute the classical French traditionalists for Guénon, and then they weren't first-rate thinkers either. Um, and maybe people will pay more attention to it. But man, most of the people you're going to meet are probably going to be kind of leftist, but you want to learn how to differentiate between them because they're not all on the same page. Think of yourself as having to learn another language. So, all right, James O'Corn, what was the name of the guy you studied Schopenhauer with? Well, I took a class with him. I studied Schopenhauer before that. That was Schirmacher at European Graduate School. He was the head of the school at the time, and Wolfgang Schirmacher. And he was also the president of the International Schopenhauer Association or Society. Really interesting interpretation of him. I kind of like him. All right, Arvid, what do you think of Dokken, Stryper in Europe? I like Dokken, Stryper in Europe. I don't really like him at all. And even Dokken is getting on the light side for my taste, Another band that kind of fits in there, but has got a bit more gritty that I really, really like, that sometimes people are surprised by, is Rat. But I wasn't really into what I called metal light, or what people nowadays call hair metal. I'm more into what we'd call traditional heavy metal. So the bands that I I really enjoy would be like in the 70s. You got the classic three of Black Sabbath, Deep Purple, and Uriah Heep, and then you get Montrose coming in, and Judas Priest, and Motorhead. Hawkwind I also like. And then we get like this burgeoning in the late 70s, early 80s. Well, UFO too, I really love them. Scorpions, Accept, Iron Maiden, Tank, Raven, Saxon. In the States, we got Kiss, we got Twisted Sister in the New York area, and Riot just in New Jersey. And then in LA, we've got, the nexus of Motley Crue, Rat, Quiet Riot, Wasp, sort of American metal, Lizzie Borden. This is all kind of heavy stuff, right? And then, we also have, of course, a few other bands in there that I've left out. But that's the kind of stuff that I was really into. Dokken was kind of on the light side for me. I could get into it. Back in the day, I did see them in concert at Monsters of Rock years ago, and they were good. But then they had George Lynch, so I don't know about that now. All right, 55327. The dude cosplay in a Core Concepts video for April Fool, please. Well, now if I did it, that would kind of give it away, wouldn't it? But actually, that's not a bad idea. I don't know about like as a Core Concept video, but it's not a bad idea. I'll tell you, I did think about for April Fools, and I never did this. I thought about doing one of those videos where I'd be like, well, it's been a good run. Really have enjoyed making all these videos, but I'm too busy now. I'm going to close up shop, and then get to the end and say April Fools, but I never did that. Subconscious Qualms. Have you read anything from David Foster Wallace? If you have, what do you think of his work? I've read a few essays. I'm not a big fan. I don't understand what the buzz is about. So yeah. Robert, what's your favorite movie? I haven't seen it for years, but I will still say that my favorite movie is The Duelists, which is a Ridley Scott movie early on with David Carradine. no, David Carradine and Harvey Keitel as the main characters. Beautifully done, beautiful sound score, great sword play in it, classic story. Yeah, so that's good. Ken says, it seems Heidegger was a serious Catholic growing up, yet still continued to read a lot of Catholic theology. Did he leave the faith due to more philosophical reasons or something else? Yeah, I think he left it behind. So same thing with Max Scheler, right? They were both going to be the great Catholic philosopher for Germany. They both ended up leaving it behind. Probably some of it had to do with there's always some crazy bullshit going on with the church hierarchy. Anytime you look at the church is always in need of reformation from within and often doesn't get it. And I think Heidegger, with Heidegger and with Scheler, there's also intellectual reasons why they left that behind. But they thought that it still mattered. And why would you stop reading Catholic thinkers just because you aren't going to church, aren't a Catholic, right? They're still important thinkers, right? Mubin, are you a physicalist or a dualist, or are you somewhere in the middle, like non-reductive physicalist? Not something I think about very often. I guess you could say that I'm probably more dualist than physicalist or monist materialist, right? In that I don't think that everything is reducible to simply configurations of matter, whatever else there's going to be. But yeah, it's not something I devote a ton of thought to, quite frankly. Arvid, what are some good books on forgiveness and redemption? How bad can a person be before they've lost all hope of redeeming themselves? Good books. That's tough. I mean, there's a literature out there on it, but it's not something that I do a lot of research on. So I don't have any great suggestions for you about that. How bad can a person be before they've lost all hope of redeeming themselves? Dead. Right? I mean, there's always some hope, but if you only have a little bit of time, and if redemption has to do not just with like saying that you feel like you're wrong or something, but actually doing a lot of work to like fix things, both within yourself and in all the stuff that you screwed up, maybe there's some practical considerations about that as well. Adam, is there a phenomenon of consciousness in Heidegger's philosophy? If not, what does he replace it with? I'm not sure what a phenomenon of consciousness means. A concept of consciousness? I mean, the whole thing is phenomenology is about being conscious, right? So, and consciousness of things. So I'm not sure what's being asked. Kyle says, I know you're a stickler for catch-all terms. Do you think something like metamodernism may be a harbinger for future discourse practices? I don't know. I've never heard that phrase, metamodernism. I don't know what it means. So, E. Demont, if someone's going to get a bachelor's in philosophy, what do they recommend they focus on? Do you think logic would be most beneficial? I'd focus on taking all your classes, taking a wide range of stuff. If you want to study just logic, see how far that gets you, you're missing out on some stuff then, but it's, you can certainly make progress with it. I did a lot of work on logic because I was a philosophy and mathematics major. Got enough to like get out on the other side and realize that not everything could be reduced to it. So, or even to language or something like that. Adam, are you planning to write or publish your magnum opus? I would first have to have a magnum opus. So I'm nowhere near that point. There's a lot of things I want to write and publish, a lot of books I want to write, and not a single one of them is a magnum opus. They're mostly things like, on other thinkers, or, I'd like to revisit the Christian philosophy debates. Some of what I'd like to do is popularizing things for people, making, like taking the Aristotelian virtues and saying, how do you actually live these out in life today? I want to write a book, on end of life decisions for pet owners. There's a lot of things I want to do, but none of them are what I would consider my magnum opus. And I'm not sure there's a magnum opus in me. And I I don't think there has to be necessarily. Not all of us are designed to write the next, uh, meditations on first philosophy, or the phenomenology of spirit, or life of the mind, or something like that. So, all right, Dora, can I please make more videos on Lacan? Maybe a Lacan for Dummies series. If I could do some videos on Lacan. It's a matter of, again, finding the time, right? That's always the tricky thing for me, because I got to work to earn a living, right? I have a life, and got one kid about to go off to college, so I do a lot of teaching, and I do a lot of various types of work, and I do a lot of public speaking and things like that. So it's a matter of making the time. I like Lacan quite a bit. All right, Dylan, to what degree will I understand Hegel's logic by reading the shorter logic versus the larger logic? I started to read the Phenomenology of Spirit, PDG, but it seems I should at least read the shorter logic to really flesh it out. I mean, they're all different books. They're all different works, right? You're not going to find much connection between the encyclopedia logic and the science of logic. And they're really designed to do two very different things, I guess. So yeah, that's about it. Let's see, retro gamer, concepts versus injunctions. Do you give credibility to a cognitive dissonance encountered when being asked to explore scholars couched in a religious tradition who gives supplication and instruction? Do I give credibility to a cognitive dissonance encountered when being asked to explore scholars couched in a religious tradition who gives supplication and instruction? Not quite sure what all that means. I'm the kind of person that I don't have to buy into somebody's religion to take seriously the framework of concepts and experiences and meanings that are important for them and their community in understanding what it is that they're doing. I can put myself imaginatively into their place. So for example, I'm not a Buddhist, but I can understand the difference between Zen and Pure Land Buddhism, and why they're at so many odds on so many different things over things that they take very seriously. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say on that. Jason, what's my thoughts on Beyond Good and Evil? I like Nietzsche a lot. I draw quite a bit on him. I think he's pretty interesting. So it's a great book. All right, let's see here. Skipped up a bit, or skipped down a bit. Anton, why are the existentialists, more Camus and Nietzsche, so popular and widely regarded today? Is it because their ideas are inherently more relatable to a general audience, or is it something more? I mean, I don't think that they're more popular and widely regarded today. Existentialism was probably more popular in the 50s through 80s than it is at present. But I'll say this about existentialism. So I got into it quite a bit as a kid. I mean, Nietzsche and Kierkegaard were people I was reading and really enjoying, and so was Camus back when I was in undergraduate. And I went through a massive Nietzsche phase in graduate school. That was tied in with other things going on too, kind of elitism and focus on the body, and lots of sort of thumatic stuff. And then what I was getting out of it when I was younger, it's real stuff. Those are real themes in these thinkers. But then when I returned to it in my 40s and started rereading and rethinking, there's so much more stuff there. There's some some really great thought involved across the existentialist spectrum. And there's a lot of kind of undervalued stock. I've mentioned Lev Shestov many times. Ortega y Gasset is somebody worth reading. Miguel de Unamuno, really worth reading as well. There's all sorts of thinkers who we could bring out and adapt to modern life. And the existentialists, they may not have had, like, say, cell phones, but they were thinking about other stuff that had to do with day-to-day living. So that's important. All right. Let's see here. The Mo something. I'm sorry if this question offends you. I swear I'm not trying to corner or humiliate you. I'm truly curious about this. Ask with all respect. As a knower of the history of thought, how can you have faith and be a Christian at the same time know all the other beliefs that ended up transforming into Christianity? Because I don't have an exclusivist viewpoint where it's like, well, we got this little box here and this little box here. I have no problem saying that Zoroastrianism gave Christianity through Judaism its conception of hell. I think that's really cool. Hell is a fiery place, that is, right? It's not a problem. I think the only time that people really have problems with that is when they're very, very rigid, and that's so artificial. It's almost like they're more into a set of ideas than they are the real lived experience. I mean, I've known Zoroastrians. I was lucky enough to have one as a nice teacher when I was in undergraduate. And you compare notes about things, and you're on the same page about a lot of things. If you want to call the judgment one thing or the judgment another thing, I don't really have a problem with that. And if I wind up making it through some miracle or through grace or something like that into heaven, and it turns out that oh no, Jesus wasn't God himself, and say the Muslims had it right and he was a prophet, you think I'm going to bitch and whine when I'm up there? I mean, I'd be an idiot to do so, right? So it's and I'll tell you, how did I come back to not just Christianity but the Catholic Church, which is just filled with all sorts of problems, by the way, but is at every point in its history. Just read Anselm, read his letters. It was through reading people that I actually respected, like Anselm and Aquinas and Chesterton, and seeing that they weren't dummies and that they saw quite often, the picture was better from where they stood than just standing outside and saying, "Oh, I'm not going to go in there," and you can go in and go out. 09, whatever, Rickson, what are your thoughts on Merleau-Ponty? Cheers from Canada. I like Merleau-Ponty. I've tried writing on him before, never really successfully. I like his phenomenology of perception. He's somebody who I used to read a lot more often. Don't do it quite so often anymore. Retro Gamer John Paul II, his degree dissertation was on Max Scheler. Surely his written work stands more than the course of their lives. Yeah, I mean, that's one reason to read Scheler, I guess. I mean, you can also read Scheler because he was great. He's a great phenomenologist and sociologist of knowledge, and has some really brilliant insights about the human condition and history and things like that. But if the fact that John Paul II wrote his dissertation on Scheler is what gets you into it, then great. Favorite poet and poems. Probably Rilke. I'm really big on him. I like him as a poet, but I also like, the letters that he wrote and the novels and things like that. Canaglavi, Aquinas' Compendium of Theology has a few sections on sin. No idea what a compendium of theology is. Do you mean the Summa Theologia? If so, then it doesn't have a few sections on sin. It has a whole bunch of them. But maybe the compendium is like some best hits list that somebody's put together. Gabriel Sutherland, going off a previous question, some of my own experience, how do you feel about the common hand-waving of idealism or non-physical monism that happens in education and other places? Well, I think everybody's doing hand-waving when you get down to the very bottom. I mean, I think materialists are hand-wavers as well, if we're going to get quite, honest about these sorts of things. I think that, we're all doing the best we can to figure out what the hell's going on and where we are and how to make it a little bit better, and that sort of stuff. All right, Mr. Big Weekney, would you ever do a video on Levinas? Sure, yeah. He's one of the few altruistic phenomenologists. Again, you want to read Scheler, right? So it'd be unique to hear my thoughts on him. Yeah, Levinas is cool. I got a lot of Levinas when I was in graduate school. I actually studied with a guy who was one of the original translators of Levinas before he took his name off the work because he had a sort of argument with his mentor at the time about how to translate things. But I got turned off by Levinasians because they're always like, "Oh, you're effacing the face of the other." They bring up all these tropes. You're doing theory, therefore you're engaging in hypocrisy, and you're effacing the other, and all this stuff. And after a while, you get like, first off, that's not Levinas. Read some of his other stuff. Second, you're all a drag to hang around with. All right. Gabriel asks, why is it the two choices that are often presented are physicalism or dualism instead of presenting all three options? Who says there's only three? Whenever people are like ism versus ism versus ism, I always struggle to like figure out why we have to frame it that way to begin with. That's not how it was framed in the long tradition of philosophy, right? We if we can't fit the great thinkers that we want to talk about within these narrow boxes, those boxes are at fault. That's the problem there. All right. Let's see. Arvid, Heidegger's association with Nazism is a bigger problem for Arendt's legacy than it is for his own. Agree or disagree? Totally disagree. Why the hell would that be a problem for Arendt? She was with Heidegger when she was quite young. She didn't, she almost died under the Nazis, right? She writes, I mean, one of her great works is The Origins of Totalitarianism. She's definitely not pro-Nazi, so I don't know where that would be coming from. All right, I'm gonna have to draw it to a close. I have to do a lot of grading, unfortunately, midterms. Macaroons. The modern political right seems to have become somewhat attached to Nietzsche. What's your opinion on this, and what do you think the right accurately embodies within Nietzsche's philosophy? I mean, that was an issue back in the day too. It's not a absolutely new thing. I think most people who talk about Nietzsche don't know what the hell they're talking about, whether they're on the left or the right or the center, because Nietzsche's a hard thinker, and there's a lot going on, a lot of moving parts to his philosophy, right? I know that many people on the right who I've interacted with, Nietzsche would consider them, basically filled with ressentiment and subject to their own herd mentality. They all like to think of themselves as like, the new Übermenschen, right? But they're not. I mean, let's be honest about that. So that's really, I think that's sort of the damning thing. Would Nietzsche look at them and say, oh, yeah, I've seen your type before, and it is a type, and it's not the highest, or would Nietzsche consider them to be some great, I don't know, whatever you want to consider it. Retro Gamer says, "Have a nice lunch." Thank you very much. That's very nice of you, and I will. Although here now it's actually going towards dinner time, so maybe I'll do that tomorrow. It's we leapt ahead because I always get it mixed up. Is daylight saving time over, or are we in daylight savings time now? I think daylight savings time is over, and so it's now 5:33. So it's time for me to figure out what I'm going to cook. So all right, let's see what else I can take very quickly. Oh, Lou, how do you stay so driven? I find it amazing how much you understand and comprehend. Well, I always feel like I'm not getting enough done. And a lot of it, I think, is, years and years of developing habits. And so you get a kind of inertia that carries you through, which is cool when you've got habits established. As far as what I understand and comprehend, I've been studying philosophy in an academic way since I was 20 years old. And I had studied, bits and pieces of it before because I wanted to understand things. I can't say that the Nietzsche that I read or the Camus that I read when I was, like in high school, I actually did understand very much of it, but I was trying, right? And I never, although I do specialize in some things, I never just wanted to remain specialized just in one area. I always wanted to keep reading and reading and reading and seeing what other people had to say. So that's part of it. And I was fortunate to wind up when I was in school at places where it was pluralistic, so no one group dominated. So I didn't buy into the prestige of, oh, you got to do philosophy this way or else you're no good, right? The way I think a lot of impressionable young graduate students do. And I never bought into the prestige of whatever it is that's the latest trend at the Ivy League, because I knew that they were no different than the rest of us, and so that was helpful, I think. All right. Let me see if there's something else I can quickly knock out. All right. There was one that okay. So here's a good one to sign off on. And let me remind you too, before we end the session, if you haven't voted in the poll about, what you'd most like to see in the core concept videos going forward, ancient, medieval, early modern, 19th century, 20th, 21st century, make sure to vote in that poll. Click the little I button, and then it'll be the second thing down there. So Ken asks, I know you've just mentioned you're not a big Husserl fan. What do you think of the story of his students like Edith Stein literally risking their life by smuggling his work in Nazi-occupied countries? Well, I think that's very cool, right? And the Husserl archives at Leuven they exist there precisely because of that. And there was a lot of it. And he wasn't the only person whose archives were smuggled like that. Again, Max Scheler. Max Frings carried around the Scheler archives in a bunch of suitcases for years and years and years, right? I think it was Maria Scheler had originally secreted them away, and then Frings got his hands on them. That's all, very important stuff, right? And we could think of even getting people out of these countries. Again, bring up Hannah Arendt. She barely escaped the concentration camps herself. Edith Stein was not so lucky. This is all quite important. It doesn't change anything about Husserl himself and the interest or dullness of his phenomenological descriptions. And a lot of it, again, has to do with temperament. We don't all have to like the same philosophers. It's not. I don't say that Husserl is not an important philosopher or he's not a great philosopher. I just don't find him particularly interesting. And since I have limited time on my hands, and I'm maybe going to be lucky enough to live another 30 to 40 years, that's I have to make decisions about where I put my time and priorities. So. All right, I'm going to sign off. Thanks to everybody for joining me for this celebration. 500 videos in, hopefully another 500 videos and more in the future, God willing. And I'll see all of you in our next event for the month. Well, maybe I will, maybe I won't, which will be one of our philosophy pop-ups coming up. I won't say exactly when, but it's coming up this coming week. And have a great afternoon, evening, morning, night, whatever it happens to be where you're signing in from. So, bye.